What's up guys, if you just want to see the world burn and bathe in eternal fire, then this Righteous Fire Scion is the build for you. I've so far tested the build up to and including tier 12 maps, and so far it feels very safe and has decent clear speed, and with the right gear I'm sure you can do even the highest tier maps and bosses. Furthermore, the build is fairly budget friendly, however it's not a build I would recommend as your first character if you're new to Path of Exile, as it does require a few unique items and the mechanics in which allows you to run Righteous Fire can be a little complicated. For defenses, this build makes use of a high amount of life, multiple endurance charges, tons of armor, and a very selective flask setup, with each providing their own defense and utility. And so the way Righteous Fire works is by dealing fire damage to yourself and to your enemies. The burn damage is based on your maximum life total, and you can thus gain more damage by having more life, so it's pretty cool. The more tanky you get, the more damage you also deal. To prevent the fire damage from degenerating your life, you will need to have a very high amount of life regeneration and fire resistances, and I'll show you in a bit how you can get that by following this guide. So, your main damage setup consists of Righteous Fire, increased burning damage, elemental focus, increased area of effect, and concentrated effect. To apply your curse, elemental equilibrium, and fortify, you will need Cyclone, Fortify, Curse on Hit, and Flammability. With this setup you will, granted of course that you have a bit of cold or lightning damage on your jewelry, apply elemental equilibrium, thus making the monsters more resistant to either cold or lightning, but also making them less resistant to fire damage, allowing your Righteous Fire to deal more damage to them. Additionally, this setup also makes it so that each time you hit the monsters you will gain the Fortify buff, increasing your damage mitigation, and also apply the Flammability curse, reducing the monster's fire resistances, again making Righteous Fire deal more damage. To proc the very powerful Keystone Elemental Overload effect you will need to occasionally crit. To do this, I recommend the following setup: cast when damage taken, Blade Vortex, increased critical strike chains, and increased duration. Make sure to check the forum guide to see how far you need to level each individual gem for it to work properly. With this setup you will, every time you take a bit of damage, cast Blade Vortex, which then has a certain duration of uptime where it has a chance to crit. Once it crits you will proc Elemental Overload. This setup is fairly reliable as long as you're taking damage. If you prefer, you can instead take out the cast when damage taken gem and cast it manually. To further improve your defenses, I also recommend cast when damage taken linked with Immortal Call, increased duration, and Stone Golem. With this setup you will, whenever you take a bit hit of damage, automatically proc Immortal Call, thus making you immune to physical damage for a short duration, and summon your Stone Golem, which for this build is optional. You can use other golems if you prefer, but I really like the extra life regen it provides. To help sustain the life degeneration from Righteous Fire, you will first of all need a Purity of Fire and Vitality. Both of these skill gems needs to be of minimum level 17. This is very important as you otherwise won't be able to out-regen the degen of Righteous Fire. And for the remaining socket, I would also recommend that you add in Enduring Cry to help you generate endurance charges for your Immortal Call. Finally, to further boost your damage and survivability, you will need Vaal Molten Shell, increased duration, and Life Leech. This setup makes you incredibly tanky in those situations where you receive multiple hits over a short duration. Furthermore, the added armor and life leech it provides is excellent when dealing with bosses, as it deals a ton of damage. Now, the biggest downside of this build is that you can't start using Righteous Fire until level 65, where you can get your Rise of the Phoenix shield and your leveled Purity of Fire and Vitality. Until then you'll have to level as something else. I personally equipped 2 Life Sprig wands, a Gold Rim, a pair of Wanderlust, and decided on using Spark, Faster Casting, or Spell Echo once you can get that, and Controlled Destruction in one of the Life Sprigs. In the other one I added Orb of Storms, Controlled Destruction, and Elemental Focus. This setup will carry you all the way to level 65, however it does start to fall off sometime around level 50, which makes reaching the last 15 levels a bit of a chore. And I'd also suggest that while you're using this setup that you spec into some cast speed, elemental, and or spell damage nodes to make it more efficient and enjoyable, and then spec out of them later once you start using Righteous Fire. Once you reach level 65 you need to equip your Rise of the Phoenix shield, your Purity of Fire, your Vitality, and again they both need to be level 17 or higher. And then you need to have picked up all of the life regen nodes as suggested in the skill tree. This will allow you to sustain the degen of Righteous Fire, and you can now start to use it. If you want additional life regen, I also suggest using the stone golem as I mentioned earlier. If you're still degenerating life, it's because your total life pool is too small. Having a high total life pool also increases your life regeneration. For instance, I needed about 500 flat life regeneration to sustain my Righteous Fire in the beginning. But as I've gained more life since then, my current life regeneration is around 800 without the endurance and frenzy charges. Another important thing to note is that you should try to avoid energy shield as much as possible, as it will increase the amount you burn for. You will get a bit of energy shield on the uniques, but besides those, try to minimize it. The Ascendancy class of choice for this build is the Ascendant mix of the Trickster and the Pathfinder. This will give you more effective regen, damage, and flask utility. If you prefer, you can instead choose the Elementalist over the Pathfinder. As always, guys, if you're in doubt on how to spend your skill points, then make sure to check the leveling skill tree templates listed in the forum build guide for a more detailed step-for-step approach. The link is in the description of the video. As for the bandits, you need to help Oak on normal, kill them all in cruel, and help Kraton on merciless difficulty for the extra frenzy charge. For your gear, you primarily need to look for affixes such as added flat life, strength, armor, increased fire damage, and of course enough elemental resistances so that you can be capped in merciless. Remember that the more life you have, the more damage Righteous Fire is going to deal. And to cover your intelligence and dexterity requirements of your skill gems and gear, try to get a bit of those attributes on the gear you craft or buy as well. Now, the only required unique item for this build is the Rise of the Phoenix Shield. This shield raises your fire resistances cap by 8%, allowing you to, along with your level 17 Purity of Fire, to reach 87% fire resistance. Since Righteous Fire deals fire damage, this means your character will be able to mitigate this damage easier and allow you to sustain the degen effect as long as you have enough life regeneration. Another item I highly recommend for this build is the Blooddane's Boots. These boots will allow you to generate frenzy charges, which greatly boosts your damage, but as a very important side bonus also increases your life regeneration by 0.5% for each active endurance charge. Finally, I also highly recommend the cheap but very powerful Dune's Cubiari Scepter. By placing your Vaal Molten Shell setup into this, it will be supported by a level 30 implicit Iron Will, thus greatly increasing its damage. Furthermore, this scepter adds 1% increased damage per 8 strength, which obviously means then that you need to get as much strength as possible on your rare items to effectively scale this. Reaching 550 to 600 strength in total is not that hard and will grant you 75% damage increase, which on top of the implicit 10% increased elemental damage from the scepter, grants you 85% increased damage to both Righteous Fire and Vaal Molten Shell, thus rivaling even the Doriani Scepter. I'd also recommend, if you can afford it, to get yourself a Carcass Jack, as it will greatly increase the area of effect and damage of Righteous Fire, while still providing some life and elemental resistances. It's more of a luxury item, however, so don't worry if you can't afford it. The flask setup for this type of character is very important, so listen up. You will need one Seething Divine Life Flask of Dowsing. This is your panic flask. You use this to turn off Righteous Fire and to rapidly regen life. To heal otherwise, you will need 2 ample ruby flasks of warding. These flasks will greatly increase your maximum fire resistance for a short duration, thus decreasing the amount of damage Righteous Fire deals, which makes you regen life much more effectively. So basically they work as a healing potion. Unless you can afford the Rumi's concoction, I'd also suggest that you get yourself an ample granite flask of iron skin and finally an ample quicksilver flask of staunching. Again, it's very important that you understand that your ruby flask serves as your healing flasks. The Seething Life Flask is only for panic situations or for when you want to turn off Righteous Fire. And that's it, guys. Make sure to check the forum guide for more details and for future updates to the build. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them down in the comment section or in the forum post. If you liked the video and want to see more, subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching, and bros, do you even nerd?